When William Ruto took office, hope filled the streets of Nairobi. Young people everywhere spoke of change in the air. They had watched him promise jobs and new chances. They believed those words meant something real. In small shops and crowded classrooms, talk turned to the future. Some said at last their families would see relief. Others dreamed of opening businesses they had only talked about before. Amina was one of them. She was 25, bright-eyed and full of drive. Her parents had run a tiny tailoring shop in a busy Nairobi neighborhood for years. Amina grew up stitching fabric and learning how to measure, cut, and sew. She saw the way her mother's hands moved with pride as she created dresses and shirts. But customers were fewer now. The cost of cloth rose, and bills grew high. Amina watched her family struggle, and she believed that Ruto's bottom-up plan could help them. She pictured her parents buying better machines or renting a larger space. She pictured herself training other young tailors and building something bigger across the city. Other young graduates felt the same spark. David had just finished university with a degree in information technology. He spent nights teaching himself, coding by the glow of his old laptop. He dreamed of designing apps that could help farmers share market prices or let doctors reach patients in remote villages. He joined a youth tech group that met in a dusty conference hall. Over cups of tea, they sketched ideas on paper and talked about grants they hoped to win. Each slide of their simple presentation ended with Ruto's name. They believed he would back their dreams with funding and guidance. In Mombasa, Mariam studied to become a nurse. She longed to work in a modern clinic near her home on the coast. She imagined better equipment for her patients and faster training courses that would sharpen her skills. She knew the health system needed more hands and hearts. She watched the news for mentions of promised medical scholarships. She marked each passing week on her calendar, hoping that her number would come up. But as months moved forward, cracks began to show. In small workshops like Amina's, cloth prices climbed again. Her mother had to pawn a piece of fabric just to repair an old sewing machine. Amina spent afternoons knocking on the doors of local officials, asking for support or a low-interest loan. She found nothing but busy schedules and polite smiles. In the markets, she heard merchants whisper that Ruto's plans had shifted toward bigger projects, roads, dams, and hotels. No one talked about small businesses or youth programs anymore in the tech group. David and his friends waited for the promised innovation fund. They checked email every morning, hearts pounding if they saw a message from a government address. Some members of the group began to leave for jobs outside Kenya. They took offers in Rwanda, Uganda, or even further abroad. Each departure felt like a betrayal. David stayed behind, but doubt gnawed at him. He wondered if his code and presentations would ever matter to those in power. Mariam watched her scholarship hopes fade too. The application process stretched beyond every deadline she knew. She asked her teachers and other nurses, but no one could explain why nothing was moving. She saw classmates graduate and secure postings in private clinics. Still, she waited, pinning her dreams on faxed documents and unanswered emails. In Kisumu, John was a carpenter who dreamed of building furniture for tourist lodges around Lake Victoria. He had taught himself fine carving by watching old craftsmen in the village. He saved small amounts of money from odd jobs. When Ruto spoke of supporting cottage industries, John felt a spark of excitement. He pictured orders rolling in from hotels, bringing in good pay for his work. He spent nights drafting design sketches by lantern light, imagining chairs with graceful curves and tables, inlaid with local patterns. Then John heard that the new grant program was only for people in big cities. He took the bus to Kisumu town and went to a meeting organized by an aide to a local MP. The aide handed out vague pamphlets and said the funding was coming soon. John asked for a timeline. The aide shrugged. Soon turned into maybe next quarter and then into we are reviewing priorities. Months later, the meeting hall felt cold and empty when John returned. All around Kenya, young people began to talk of disappointment. Facebook posts and Twitter threads lit up with voices complaining that empty words had replaced real action. Amina scrolled through comments of fellow tailors who felt unseen. David read articles questioning whether the bottom-up plan had ever meant the bottom really mattered. Mariam heard her former classmates talking about working abroad. John saw carpenters packing their tools to seek work in South Sudan or Tanzania. Yet even in disappointment, a sense of unity began to form. In the cafes where students studied, they now discussed the gap between promise and practice. Tailors who once worked alone invited each other into small cooperatives to share costs. Tech hopefuls formed informal coding circles, teaching one another free from deadlines imposed by officials. Nurses wrote to each other late at night to share tips on studying without scholarship support. Carpenters pooled wood orders, negotiating better prices together. Through their shared hardship, they found strength. They reminded each other of why they started. Amina's mother spoke softly to her daughter one morning, saying, "We will keep stitching. We will keep hoping." Amina nodded and opened the shop early, sewing sample dresses while humming a tune of determination. David stayed up late, debugging one more line of code. Mariam volunteered at a local clinic, helping patients even without a paid position. John carved a small bench for his neighbor's child. Proud of each small creation, behind these personal stories lay a growing question. Had their hopes been betrayed? Each young person wrestled with that idea. They remembered rallies where they had cheered for Ruto and chanted slogans of change. It stood under bright banners and believed that the banner words would turn into concrete action. Now they struggled between holding on to that belief and admitting that the promise had fallen short. Still, they held on. In makeshift gatherings under mango trees and in cramped apartments, they talked of plans that did not depend on big speeches. They spoke of using each other's skills and forging new paths. Amina planned to teach tailoring workshops in her neighborhood. David organized a free hackathon in his tech circle. Mariam started a small group that shared medical books and homegrown herbal remedies. John sketched a design for a community bench project to beautify a local school. Each new effort carried the old hope in a new shape. They refused to let their dreams die because of broken promises. They learned that progress could start small and still grow big. While they still longed for government support, they realized that their own hands could build something real right now. And so, at the end of this first season of change, the youth of Kenya stood at a turning point. Their optimism had been tested by disappointment, but their spirit had not broken. They had faced the difficult truth that words alone cannot build futures. They had chosen to act on their own strength, weaving new threads of hope into the fabric of their lives. In the slow dawn of this new era, they prepared for the next step, one shaped by their own resolve and by a growing belief that, together, they could write their own story. The television glowed in living rooms and roadside cafes across East Africa when Ibrahim Traore spoke. He sat behind a simple wooden desk in Ouagadougou, wearing his uniform in the calm, steady gaze of someone used to carrying heavy burdens. Viewers in Nairobi, Mombasa, Dar es Salaam, and beyond leaned forward as the Burkina Faso leader spoke of young Africans left behind. His words cut through the usual speeches about trade deals and security pacts. Instead, he named names. He spoke of presidents who made lofty promises in campaign rallies, then turned away from the very people who cheered them on. In that moment, William Ruto became a symbol. Traore did not hesitate when he said that Kenya's president had betrayed the hopes of youth who once believed in his bottom-up vision. The phrase struck like thunder on a clear day, bringing sudden attention to a truth many felt but had not voiced so boldly. From dusty towns to crowded universities, young people stopped what they were doing to watch the clips reposted on social media. A 12-second snippet went viral, Traore's steady voice, and the words empty words, and his call for leaders to stop speaking and start acting. In Nairobi, university student David was sitting in a crowded lab when his friend tapped him on the shoulder. "Watch this," she whispered, handing him her phone. David replayed the clip, saw Traore's face framed by the flag of Burkina Faso, and heard the direct accusation. He felt a jolt of relief. Someone else had seen the gap between promise and reality. He turned to his classmates, many of whom had tried and failed to secure government grants for their tech projects. He pointed at the phone and said, "That's how we feel." Words spread quickly. WhatsApp groups buzzed with urgent messages. Traore spoke the truth. Time to act. Kenyan youth, listen up. In a small tailoring shop in Eastlands, Amina paused her sewing to watch the video on her mother's old tablet. She pressed play again and again. Each time, her heart sank a little less. She thought of the afternoons she spent traveling to government offices only to find closed doors. She thought of the nights she spent stitching sample dresses, hoping for a loan that never arrived. Now she felt the weight of collective disappointment and the stirrings of collective power. Across neighborhoods, informal gatherings formed. In Mombasa, Mariam met with a group of nursing students under a mango tree. Someone had projected the speech onto a white sheet using a small portable speaker. They passed around cool, fizzy drinks and traded stories of unanswered scholarship applications. When the image of Traore appeared, they all cheered, as though they recognized a fellow struggler calling out injustice. Mariam felt a new energy. She raised her voice and said, "We cannot wait any longer. We must show our leaders that empty promises mean nothing." In Kisumu, John paced along the shore of Lake Victoria, the video playing on his smartphone's tiny screen. As he watched, he thought of the furniture orders that never came, of the craft fairs where officials promised to send buyers but never did. John's carving knife lay unused on his workbench back home. He clenched his fist and whispered, "Let's do something." By the next day, plans were in motion. Student activists in Nairobi started drafting petitions online. They called for a day of youth accountability. Choosing a date that fell on African Youth Day, they invited young people across the continent to join them. In Kampala, tech clubs offered to host video streams of the protests. In Dar es Salaam, civil society groups said they would provide legal observers to protect peaceful demonstrators. Even in West Africa, where Traore's words had originated, young people began to add their own local grievances, forging a Pan-African sense of purpose. Social media lit up. Hashtags like #EmptyWordsNoMore and #YouthVoicesRising trended in minutes. Photos showed students writing slogans on cardboard signs, parents sewing banners in small tailor shops, young carpenters chiseling protest props out of wood scraps. Every labor carried Traore's challenge forward, transforming his speech into a call for real changes in every capital city, every provincial town, every village where the youth felt abandoned. In the cramped living room of her parents' home, Amina sketched protest flyers on large sheets of paper. She wrote in bold letters, "From Nairobi to Ouagadougou, young voices will be heard." She added the date and time. June 12th, 4 p.m., Uhuru Park. She handed the sheets to friends who pinned them on walls and passed them around markets. Each flyer brought a sense of shared urgency. They all felt that this was their moment. Meanwhile, David and his tech group built a simple website. It mapped protest sites across Africa and provided information on safe routes, legal rights, and first aid stations. They worked late into the night, coding and testing on shaky internet connections. Every time a new city added its name, they felt a surge of pride. They called it Project Echo because they wanted Traore's words to echo from one corner of the continent to another. In Mombasa, Mariam and her nursing classmates organized a health caravan. They planned to set up mobile clinics near protest sites, offering free checkups and distributing water and snacks. They believed caring for bodies was part of caring for futures. Even if leaders refused to act, the youth would watch out for each other. By the day before the protests, excitement mixed with nervous tension. Messages flew back and forth. Who will speak at the rally? What if police stop us? We need marshals to guide people. Leaders emerged naturally: students and young professionals who had proven themselves in organizing study groups or community service. They drafted simple codes of conduct. Stay peaceful, respect all participants, help neighbors in need. On June 12th, the streets filled. In Nairobi, thousands of young people marched toward Uhuru Park, carrying signs quoting Traore's fiery words. They chanted in Swahili, English, and local dialects, "No more empty words." Their feet pounded the pavement in steady rhythms, their voices rising like waves against a silent shore. Behind them, a sea of banners bore the name of a leader from another country, but the message belonged to all of them. As the sun dipped low, the protesters reached the park entrance. Police lines blocked their path at first. There was tension in the air, but the youth stood firm, arms linked, faces calm. They recalled their own pledge to remain peaceful. Influence from the regional media portrayed the Kenyan youth as disciplined and united. Under pressure, the police allowed them to pass, and cheers erupted as the crowd entered the open field. In Ouagadougou, Accra, Abidjan, and Kigali, similar scenes played out. Smaller crowds gathered around local government offices, sharing the same slogans. Each rally carried the same spirit: a rejection of broken promises and a demand for real action on jobs, education, and services. Television cameras caught youth leaders reading statements that called on presidents to follow through or step aside. Each city sent its own echo of Traore's original challenge. Back in Nairobi, when the march ended, organizers invited everyone to a candlelight vigil. They lit candles and formed a circle around a simple wooden stage. A young woman stepped up and read a letter to President Ruto. She spoke of sewing machines that needed repair, of apps that could save lives, of nurses waiting for training scholarships, of carpenters carving dreams into wood. She ended by asking the president to meet with youth representatives within 7 days or risk losing their trust forever. After the vigil, the crowd dispersed quietly, leaving behind a field dotted with glowing candles. The mood was hopeful, but serious. The youth had shown their strength and unity, but now they waited to see if their leaders would listen. In the days that followed, news outlets debated the protests. Some called them a sign of growing political maturity. Others warned of a rift between government and the next generation. Everywhere Ibrahim Traore's words were quoted. He had spoken for more than his nation. He had spoken for young people across Africa who refused to be ignored. David, Mariam, John, and tens of thousands of others, part 2 of their story had ended with action. A simple speech had become a spark, igniting a movement that crossed borders. They had stepped into the light together, no longer waiting for someone to deliver on empty words. Now they stood ready to shape their own futures and to demand that their leaders keep pace with their dreams. The city hummed with quiet energy as young people moved from talk into action. In Nairobi, after the march and candlelight vigil, David and his tech friends gathered in a cramped room above a busy street. They spread maps of the city on a dusty table, marking safe routes to protest sites and places where help might be needed. David tapped a point near a water station and said softly, "We must guide people here if they grow tired or thirsty." His friend Fatima nodded, her eyes bright with focus. "I will train volunteers to hand out water and snacks," she promised. Outside, the roar of traffic passed by, but inside that room, every voice carried determination. At the same time, Amina stood in her family's small tailoring shop. Rolls of cloth leaned against the walls, and a single bulb hung overhead. She measured lengths of red, green, and white fabric, cutting each piece carefully. With her mother's old sewing machine humming steadily, she stitched banners that read "Youth Voices Rising" and "No More Empty Words." Each stitch felt like a promise to her neighborhood. A boy from down the road came by to help fold the finished banners. "Where will these go?" he asked. Amina smiled. "We will hang them on every lamppost along the main road, so each passerby can see our call for change." In Mombasa, Mariam met with her nursing classmates under the shade of a tall coconut tree. They organized their health caravan in neat rows. Makeshift tables held bandages, bottles of clean water, and simple first aid kits. Mariam demonstrated how to wrap a sprained ankle, speaking in short, clear sentences. Her friend James took notes on a small tablet. "We need to teach volunteers how to keep calm if someone faints," he said. Mariam agreed and added, "And we must remind them that caring for each other is our way of showing strength." Their caravan would follow the main march route, offering help to anyone who needed it. Meanwhile, in Kisumu, John worked late into the night in his wooden workshop beside Lake Victoria. The smell of fresh-cut timber filled the air. He carved wooden signs with phrases like "Together we stand" and "Our future, our hands." Each sign had smooth edges and deep grooves that caught the evening light. John's neighbor, an older carpenter named Moyangi, watched him work. "You give our cause a face with these signs," he said quietly. John paused, holding the carving, knife gently. I want people to see our words and feel hope, he replied. Manji smiled and handed John a small glass of tea. They sat together, talking of dreams for a city where young people could build their own futures. In Dar es Salaam, student leaders joined forces with local civil society groups. They printed leaflets explaining the purpose of the protests and detailing participants' rights. Under string lights in a courtyard, they folded piles of leaflets by hand. A lawyer named Aisha explained, "If police ask why you are here, speak calmly and show this leaflet. Tells them you protest peacefully." A young activist named Samira raised her hand. "What if someone feels scared or anxious?" she asked. Aisha smiled warmly. "We watch out for each other. We have marshals who guide people away from trouble spots." Across the continent, young people were learning to speak one language of solidarity and respect for every individual's safety. Online Project Echo grew by the hour. David's group added new cities and protest sites to their live map. Messages popped up. Lagos had joined. Addis Ababa would hold a rally in Mescal Square. Even small towns in Zambia and Malawi posted plans. For local gatherings, each new marker on the map felt like a heartbeat connecting distant places. Young people from Cape Town sent a video of themselves rehearsing chants. Students in Accra shared photographs of banners they made. Every image and post carried the same simple message: empty words must end here. Followers on the site began to share tips on staying hydrated, on using umbrellas to shield from sun, on forming neighborly groups to watch out for one another. In the days before the protest, tension and excitement rose together. Some parents worried that their children might face danger. Mina's mother pressed her hand gently one morning. "Promise me you will stay safe and keep calm," she said. Amina squeezed her mother's hand. "I will," she answered, "and I will help others stay calm too." In Mombasa, Mariam's father cooked extra rice and beans, packing meals. "For the health caravan volunteers, you feed bodies and hearts," he told her with pride. John's neighbor, Moinji, offered to drive carved signs into the city on his old pickup truck, despite a slow engine. In Dar es Salaam, Aisha stayed up, late drafting a simple guide to peaceful protest etiquette, which activists printed the next morning. On the morning of the protests, cities across East Africa awoke early. In Nairobi, volunteers handed out bottles of water at street corners. In Mombasa, the health caravan rolled past cheering bystanders. In Kisumu, John and Moyanji unloaded wooden signs at the lakefront rally point. In Dar es Salaam, leaflets fluttered like soft flags in the breeze. Every effort converged on one goal: to show that hopes kindled by promises must be met by real change. There was no anger in the faces that filled the streets. Instead, a quiet strength shone in determined eyes. In each place, young people carried banners, spoke to neighbors, and held hands in unity. As midday approached, voices rose together. Chants drifted on the warm air. Our future, our hands, no more empty words. Music from portable speakers added rhythm to their steps. Families stood on sidewalks, watching their children lead the way. Elders nodded in respect at the sight of youth taking charge of their own destiny. Journalists recorded speeches by student leaders who spoke in short, clear sentences. They thanked everyone for coming, reminded them to stay peaceful, and urged leaders to listen. Across the continent, each rally echoed the same determination. Youth would no longer wait in silence. At the close of Part 3, the protests were well underway, drawing in neighbors, friends, and even curious strangers. From Nairobi's wide boulevards to Kisumu's lakeside paths, the message was the same. This was not about chaos or conflict. It was about young people stepping forward to build their own future. Each banner, each leaflet, each sign carved in wood became a verse in a growing poem of unity. The stage was set for the next chapter 1, where leaders would have no choice but to respond to a united youth who would speak with clear voices and steady hearts until empty promises turned into real action. ChatGPT said, "The sun rose bright over Nairobi." As the youth gathered again at the edge of Uhuru Park, the morning light glinted off banners and signs, their colors bold against the green grass. A gentle breeze carried the chants from earlier days. Future, our hands, and mixed them with new hopes. For Amina, the day felt alive with possibility. She checked the banners she had sewn the night before, smoothing each crease and making sure the ropes were strong. Around her, neighbors and friends arrived, some carrying fresh water, others steadying microphone stands. Everyone moved with calm purpose. David joined them, carrying a small speaker and a phone plugged into its wire. He climbed onto a low platform and tapped the device. Music poured out, an upbeat song with a steady rhythm that made people sway and clap. He smiled when he saw Fatima handing out small flags to children who ran excitedly between the crowd. Their laughter felt like sunlight on stone, softening the edges of tension. David thought of his coding nights and presentations of hopes stored in lines of text. Now those hopes had become voices, and the voices had become a living, breathing crowd. Mariam arrived soon after, leading the health caravan. She wore a bright vest with a red cross on the back. At her side, nursing students carried trays of snacks and bottles of water. They set up folding tables under the shade of a large jacaranda tree. Mariam welcomed the volunteers with a calm voice. "Let us be ready for everyone who needs us," she said. Then she gestured toward a row of chairs where older citizens sat quietly, curious but cautious. A few smiled when they saw Mariam's group offering chairs and water. One old man picked up a small bottle and whispered, "Thank you, my child." Mariam nodded and said, "We stand for each other today." John and Moinji arrived in a battered pickup loaded with wooden signs. The truck rumbled to a stop, and a small crowd cheered as they unloaded the signs. Each one read phrases like "Listen to youth" and "No more empty words." John placed one sign carefully in the ground, near a group of students who formed a semicircle around him. He looked out at the crowd and felt his heart beating like a drum. He thought of the long nights carving each letter, the splinters on his fingers, and the hope that had driven him forward. Now it stood before him, a silent call to action. As the crowd swelled, the police arrived. A line of officers in blue uniforms stood at the park entrance, faces serious but not hostile. Amina felt a chill, but remembered the pledge to remain peaceful. She linked arms with friends and whispered, "We show respect and strength." Nearby, an older activist named Samuel approached the police captain. I offered a folded leaflet explaining the protest's peaceful intent. The captain took it with a nod and studied it. After a few moments, he motioned his officers to step aside. They moved back, creating a clear path into the open field. A collective cheer rose from the crowd, but the youth held their energy, turning it into determined looks rather than wild shouts. At the center of the field, a simple wooden stage stood ready. A group of student leaders climbed onto it, each carrying a speech in simple words. A hush fell as one young woman took the microphone. She spoke in a clear voice. "Today we stand for change. We stand for our dreams and our dignity. We ask our leaders to remember the promises they made and to act on them." Her words echoed across the field. She paused, letting them settle. Then she said, "We bring our hopes here. We bring our skills, our work, our sweat. We ask for respect, for support, and for honesty." David watched from the edge of the stage. He felt a lump in his throat as he saw faces shining with resolve. Some wore bright fabrics, others held phones high to record the moment. Behind the speakers, the canopy of trees offered cool shade. In the branches, birds chirped as though they, too, listened. He remembered nights spent coding alone. Now his work had become bigger than any screen. He felt a shift inside him, as if his own voice carried weight. Next, Mariam stepped forward. She spoke about the health caravan and the need for caring communities. She shared stories of elderly neighbors who waited for medical help that never came, of mothers who walked miles seeking simple medicines. She spoke of the hope in nursing students' hearts. "We are ready to heal," she said. "All we need is the chance." Her words touched many, and a wave of supportive applause rose up. Even some police officers clapped, their expressions softening. Then John walked to the microphone, spoke slowly, carefully choosing each word. "I carve wood," he said. "I shape it with my hands. I create beauty from rough pieces. but I cannot carve us a future without support." He raised his voice, slightly not in anger, but in clear determination. "We need opportunities like we need air and water. Give us the tools, and we will build our own paths." He stepped back, and the crowd murmured its agreement. Up on a balcony of a nearby building, journalists snapped photographs. Television cameras rolled, capturing the youth as they filled the park with songs, speeches, and determined faces. Over in Mombasa, in Accra, in Dar es Salaam, smaller satellite gatherings sent live feeds. Across Africa, viewers saw young people, standing together, calm but firm. The moment felt both local and continental, as if thousands of hearts beat in unison. Midday sun climbed higher, and organizers reminded everyone to stay hydrated and look after each other. Volunteers in bright vests guided the crowd away from direct sunlight, offering cold water and shaded spots. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, watching the stage with wide eyes. A grandmother quietly wiped sweat from her brow as a nurse gave her a small bottle of water. The crowd moved like a living organism, caring and connected. In the late afternoon, student leaders invited questions from the crowd. A young man stepped forward, his voice shaking with emotion. "What if our leaders ignore us again?" he asked. Silence fell as everyone leaned in. David felt his heart tighten. Then one student leader answered, "We will not give up. We will speak together, work together, and hold our leaders accountable. If they do not act, we will remind them again and again, peacefully and persistently." The answer spread relief through the crowd. Heads nodded, and a gentle murmur of agreement rose. As the day edged toward evening, the protest reached its climax. The youth formed a long human chain, linking hands from one side of the park to the other. They stood strong in their circle, looking outward, yet connected inward. A single drone camera hovered above, sending a live image to screens around the continent. The sight of thousands of young Africans standing hand in hand held power and hope both. From that circle, student leaders spoke one final time. They delivered a message to President Ruto and all African leaders. "We ask for action. We ask for real programs, clear funding, and honest leadership. We ask you to walk with us, not above us." They ended with a song, a simple melody sung in Swahili and English. Voices rose together in harmony. "Our future, our hands, we build our lands." The song swelled, reaching over trees, buildings, and even borders. When the last note faded, the crowd remained silent for a moment. Then a roar of applause and cheers filled the air. The youth had shown their unity, their care, and their strength. They had spoken with calm hearts and firm resolve. They had faced authority without fear, caring for each other as they went. And they had shown that their dreams were not empty, were calls to action. As dusk fell over Nairobi, the crowd slowly dispersed. Volunteers collected banners and signs, storing them for future use. Miriam's health caravan packed up its tables and supplies. John and Moyanji loaded the wooden signs. Back onto their truck, David and Fatima turned off the speaker and carefully stored the equipment. In small groups, they walked home together, sharing water and stories of the day. Amina lingered at the park edge, watching the last lights of the city turn on. She thought of her mother's brave smile that morning, of the neighbors who joined, hands in unity, of the student leaders who spoke with clear voices. She felt tired, but proud. She had sewn banners that called for change. She had stood with thousands in peaceful protests. And she had helped ignite a spark that might yet become a flame. In that soft evening light, they all carried the day with them, its hopes, its music, its voices. They knew the journey was not over, but they had taken a great step together. They had asked for action, and now they would wait to see if their leaders listened. Whatever happened next, they would remain united, their voices rising until empty words became real deeds. The next morning, Nairobi felt different. It was not just the air or the sky, but something inside. The people, especially the young ones who had stood together at Uhuru Park. The city moved like always. Cars honked. Matatus roared through traffic. and shopkeepers opened their stalls, but in many hearts, something had shifted. There was a quiet strength, a feeling that the youth were no longer waiting in the shadows. They had stepped forward, spoken up, and now the country was listening. David woke up early, his phone buzzing with notifications. Videos from the protests were everywhere on news channels, YouTube, and social media. He saw images of the human chain, the candlelight vigil, and Mary Ann tending to an elderly woman who had felt dizzy. A clip of Amina's banner fluttering in the breeze had been shared by a journalist in Ghana. Even in Burkina Faso, the country where it all began, people were talking about what happened in Nairobi. David scrolled through messages from fellow students, friends, and even strangers. One message read, "You gave us courage. Thank you." Another said, "We did not know we could stand this tall." Fatima called him and said with a smile in her voice, "We didn't just protest. We planted a seed." David nodded silently, feeling a mix of pride and responsibility. Elsewhere, Amina sat beside her sewing machine, watching the same videos. Her hands moved slowly over the fabric, but her eyes stayed fixed on the screen. When she saw a photo of her own banner hanging above the crowd, her heart swelled. Mother walked in, holding 2 cups of tea. She placed one in front of Amina and sat quietly. After a moment, she said, "You stitched more than cloth. You stitched hope into the hearts of many." Amina smiled, tears forming gently in her eyes. She took a deep breath. "It's only the beginning, Mama," she whispered. At the same time, Miriam and her nursing group gathered at their college. They were tired but filled with joy. They reviewed photos and videos of the health caravan in action. "We helped over 70 people yesterday," Miriam said, scrolling through her tablet. Her friend James added, "And we gave out 200 bottles of water." The group clapped and shared quiet laughs. Their teacher entered the room and placed a newspaper on the table. The front page showed Miriam holding a child's hand, with the headline, "Youth Lead with Care." The whole class stood up and clapped for her. Miriam blushed, but smiled proudly. "We're just getting started," she said. John, meanwhile, was back in his workshop. He cleaned his carving tools, wiping away the dust and sweat from the protest day. His signs had stood tall at the rally, and now he was receiving messages from schools and youth centers asking if he could make more. He carved a new one that morning, this time with the words, "Built by us." Amanji stopped by and saw it. Resting on the table, "That one belongs at the entrance of every school," he said. John nodded. "It's not just for buildings," he replied. "It's for our future, too." As all these small stories unfolded, something bigger was happening at the national level. News anchors spoke about the protests with words like historic and peaceful revolution. Political experts debated on talk shows about what the youth wanted and what leaders should do. Some older officials criticized the youth for pushing too hard, but others praised them for being organized, peaceful, and respectful. Then came a surprise. The president's office released a statement that afternoon. Taken note of the protest and appreciated the passion of the youth, it invited a group of representatives from different youth sector students, nurses, small business owners, and artists to meet him for a listening session at State House. The following week, the announcement spread quickly, shared thousands of times in just a few hours. David received a formal email invitation. He stared at it for a moment, unsure whether to smile or feel nervous. He forwarded it to Fatima, who called immediately. "Are you going?" she asked. "Yes," he said, "but I'll go as part of all of us." Mina received her invitation too. She pressed the message to her chest before showing it to her mother. "You will go and speak for us," her mother said. "Speak gently, but speak the truth." Miriam was invited as well. Classmates hugged her and said, "Tell them how. We can heal our country." Even John got a call from a youth program director. "We need your voice, John, and your hands." John scratched his head and chuckled. "Well, I always believed my tools would take me far. I just didn't know it would be to State House." The meeting day came. Nairobi was quieter than usual. As the youth leaders prepared to enter the president's official residence, dressed neatly, with calm faces and strong hearts, they stepped through the gates. In a large room with soft lighting and wooden walls, the president greeted them. He sat down, looked at each face and said, "You asked me to listen. I am here now. Please speak." One by one they did. David spoke about the power of technology and the need to support innovation hubs in poor neighborhoods. Mina talked about small businesses like hers that only needed a little help to grow. Miriam shared the struggles of medical students and the importance of community health centers. John, holding one of his wooden signs, said, "We want to build our future. Just give us the right tools and don't stand in our way." The president listened. He asked questions. He took notes. By the end of the meeting, he made promises, real ones. A fund would be created to support youth-led businesses, starting with sewing shops, carpentry centers, and small tech hubs. Scholarships would be expanded for nursing and health education, and youth leaders would be invited every quarter to give feedback and hold leaders accountable. It was not everything, but it was a start. After the meeting, outside the gates of State House, reporters waited. Flashing cameras and microphones surrounded the youth as they came out. David said, "We are hopeful, but we will also watch closely." Mina added, "This meeting is not the end. It is the start of a new journey." Miriam smiled gently and said, "When youth lead with care, nations grow with strength." And John, holding up his wooden sign, simply said, "We are ready." The crowd watching from home felt something deep. Parents smiled with pride. Teachers whispered, "Our students have become leaders." Children stared wide at the screen, knowing that tomorrow could belong to them too. In the weeks that followed, the government began rolling out the first set of promises. Mobile health vans appeared in some villages. Tailoring grants were announced in Nairobi's Eastlands area. A coding lab opened in Kisumu with free classes. And carpentry training programs started accepting applications in Mombasa. Progress was slow, but it was real, and the youth, they kept meeting. They formed small committees to track the government's progress. They held town hall meetings in churches, schools, and open markets. They listened to others, especially those in villages who had not yet felt the change. They helped spread the message that unity, peace, and persistence bring power. Amina started free weekend sewing classes for girls in her neighborhood. David launched an app to connect young workers with small jobs across the city. Miriam helped organize community health camps in 5 counties. And John started a Signs of Change workshop, where young people could learn to carve words of hope. Months later, Ibrahim Traore gave another speech. This time he smiled and said, "When youth lead with truth and peace, even the most powerful must listen." Across Africa, many nodded. Kenya had lit a spark, and others were watching, learning, and preparing to do the same. And so, what began with disappointment grew into unity. What began with one voice became 1,000. The youth who once waited were now builders of hope. Their message was clear. They did not want handouts. They wanted partnership, not promises. They wanted action. And now, they knew they had the power to ask, to lead, and to build. Their story continues not in shouting, but in steady hands, open hearts, and voices that will never be silent again.